All right, Genesis chapter 46. We began here in this chapter with the reflection that God gave to Jacob regarding the trip to Egypt and the move that he and the family were going to make, assuring him that this was indeed God's will. We also talked about last Sunday morning the fact that the way this was written and delivered, you have the children of God at Mount Sinai. They've been there about 2 years, and when they leave Mount Sinai, they're only 11 days out to get to the promised land, but those 11 days, they get to a place called Kadesh Barnea, and that's where they sent in the spies. And what happened with those spies, church family? You got mostly a bad report except for Caleb and Joshua. And of course, the people listened to the 10 spies. So the course was they spent 38 more years out in that wilderness. And you see why it's so important that God was so specific. These accounts are recorded because, we're just not very good oftentimes trusting God, just like the children of Israel weren't always good at trusting God. So the point here, what's being made to Jacob is, Jacob, you have to trust me. I know this seems abnormal. I know this seems different than what I have told you in the past, but you're going where I'm telling you to go. And it's okay for you to leave Canaan because I will bring the people back. And when I do, they're going to be a nation. And of course, Genesis 46:4, I myself will go with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. And that is significant because what we know about God, there are certain characteristics of God's deity. The Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. And one of those characteristics we talked about last Sunday morning, that big word, is omnipresence. That means that God is what? Everywhere. When we say everywhere, we mean what? Everywhere, right? And it's amazing. That's exactly what Jonah said. When he tried to flee to Tarshish, he wasn't getting away from God on his way to Tarshish. He wasn't getting away from God even when he was in the belly of that big fish, right? So God is always with us whenever we walk with him. And the idea here for Jacob, God is saying, you will see Joseph, and Joseph is going to provide for you, and I'm going to take care of you. Verses 5-7 tells us, then Jacob set out from Beersheba. The sons of Israel carried Jacob their father, their little ones, and their wives in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to carry him. They also took their livestock and their goods, which they had gained in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt. Jacob and all his offspring with him, his sons, and his sons' sons with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters, all his offspring he brought with him into Egypt. Now, before we read all these fancy names, I want you to think about what we've been told here in this particular narrative. We've been told about 4 generations, really. 4 generations. We've been told how when Abraham went to Egypt, how he got in trouble and came back. Was he prospering? Yes. How do we know he was prospering? Well, there was one significant event that proved to us that he was prospering, and of course that was the division between him and Lot, if you remember that. All that prosperity, as we said last Sunday morning, and yet one thing Abraham was without, and what was that? a child, a son. And so he decided, I'm going to help God out. And he and his handmaid come together and they have a child. And what did God tell him about that child? He said his name is going to be Ishmael. And he's not the heir, but God said, I'm going to take care of him. God said, I'm going to take care of him, but he is not the heir. You're going to have a son of your own body. And that son, of course, ends up being the son of promise, right? Isaac. Isaac, as we said last Sunday morning, has twin sons. Those twin sons were who, class? Jacob and Esau. The oldest was Esau. The youngest is Jacob. And you remember the prophecy, right? The hand grabbing and the one being born hanging on to the other, right? And all that good stuff. And of course, it was the second who would ultimately take the birthright from the elder, the second born, of course, being Jacob. So where does Isaac's prosperity that he received from the hand down of his father, that included Abraham's prosperity, where did that prosperity end up in the hands of? Jacob, that's right. And now he's had all these sons who are set now to live off of his prosperity. You think about it, dividing prosperity between 10 sons is a little different than handling prosperity down to one son, right? So a little different, but even in the famine, it's clear to see from the text, there's still plenty of prosperity here for Jacob and his sons. Eventually, though, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to all this prosperity? They're going to lose it. They're going to lose it because you think about it, Mount Sinai, did they have all that prosperity? No. They served as what for a long time? Slaves. That's right. Yes, they got prosperity in Egypt, but God says before they go out of the land, your neighbors are going to take care of them, and they did. They got gold and silver and animals and all that, but it wasn't their original prosperity. The point that God was trying to show them is that, I blessed your forefathers, and then Egypt took that away, and then I gave it back to you. So they got all these possessions and all these children, and I'm going to butcher all these names as I normally do, but I've tried to study them. I like pronunciations. I think it's a beautiful art. So let's kind of go through these real quickly, all right? It's beginning in verse 8 and go through verse 10. Now these are the names of the descendants of Israel who came into Egypt. Jacob and his sons, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and the sons of Reuben, Hanok, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. The sons of Simeon, Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. So there was somebody else, I'll stop there, there's somebody else that got involved in that family, right? There were some problems. Then you see in verse 11, the sons of Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And then here's the thing, class. As I'm reading through this, I'm trying to pause here. Each one of these individuals, if my memory serves me correct, are going to be a line in the tribes of the people who are gathered eventually at Mount Sinai. You have the names of the sons. They become the patriarchs, but each one of these are lines. Like, for example, I just mentioned Levi's sons here. What are their names? Again, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Well, as God gives Israel the law, they know their lineage. It's not just Levi. They know which one of those sons that they come from. And each one, if you study it, are going to have a responsibility in some specific area to them, and it either has to do with God's worship or God's temple or even how they carried things, okay? So these are written in such a way, we may not understand it fully, but they're written in such a way as these people are going to know where they came from and how God's going to use them going forward. And I'll continue with verse 12. The sons of Judah are Onan, Shelah, Perez, and Zerah. But and Onan, what? Died in the land of Canaan. We studied that. The sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamuel. Do you all remember that account? Did we forget that account? Remember what we studied back a few months ago, right? That was right after Joseph gets down to Egypt. The text skips away for that moment, if you remember, away from Joseph and talks about this event in Judah's life where Judah has a son and he marries that son off to a woman by the name of what? Tamar, right? But before she can have an heir, what happens to him? He dies, right? So he gives his second son, and he was very wicked. The text told us that he was very wicked, and God did what? Took him out, right? In some way. So he gave his second son, which was the custom, to Tamar to raise up an heir. Well, he's also wicked. So God kills him, and she has no heir, and he says, I'm done with this. Son one, son two. Third time's not going to be a charm here, right? So he won't give his third son to her. But ultimately, what did she do? Do you remember? Dressed up as a harlot, right? And he thinks she's a harlot, and Judah sleeps with her, and he has a son to her, and his name was, starts with that P, Perez, right? What's that? Twin sons, that's right. And so the text just told us, well, the brothers of Perez are all what? Dead. So all of Judah's descendants were narrowed down to just Perez, but he had sons. So there's more than one line there too. It's what he just read or wrote. The sons of Issachar are Tola, Pava, Yob, and Shimron. The sons of Zebulun are Sered, Elon, and Jaleel. These are the sons of Leah, whom she bore to Jacob in Padam Aram, together with his daughter Dinah. Altogether, his sons and his daughters numbered what? 33. Okay. That's verses 13 through 15. Let's keep going. 16 through 18. The sons of Gad. Forgive me on this one. Ziphion, Haggai, Shunai, Ezbon, Eri, Aradai, and Areli. The sons of Asher are Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, Beriah, with Sarah, their sister. And their sons of Berera, Heber, and Malchiel. These are the sons of Zilpah, whom Laban gave to Leah his daughter, and these she bore to Jacob. How many? 16 persons, okay? 19 through 21, these, the sons of Rachel, Jacob's wife. Pretty easy list, right? Joseph and Benjamin. And to Joseph in the land of Egypt were born Manasseh and Ephraim, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On, bore to him. And the sons of Benjamin, Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Ehi, Rosh, Mupam, Hupam, and Ard. I like that one, that Mupam. I don't know about y'all, but I thought about naming my firstborn Mupam, but Jennifer wouldn't let me. And I'm probably not pronouncing that one correct. But these are the sons of Rachel who were born to Jacob. How many? 14 persons in all. The sons of Dan, verse 23. Husham, the sons of Naphtali, Jaziel, Gunai, Jezer, and Shillam. These are the sons of Bilhah, whom Laban gave to Rachel, his daughter, and these she bore to Jacob. How many? 7 persons in all. Okay. All the persons belonging to Jacob who came into Egypt, who were his own descendants, not including Jacob's sons' wives, were what? 66 persons in all. And the sons of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were 2. All the persons of the house of Jacob who came into Egypt were 70. Okay? Now, I could have just skipped over all that. But I didn't because of 2 main reasons. One is, class, I really wanted to emphasize those 2 accounts that I did. And the other one is, I don't like it when in Bible classes, we get in the habit of saying a whole bunch of names and just skip over it and start reading the next part. Because if God thought it was important to give us the names, there had to be a reason why He did it. And especially, as I said, it would be important primarily to the first readers who, as I said, are at Mount Sinai getting ready to move on into the Promised Land. And this idea of trust and reminding them of trust was so very important. But there is some significance to the fact that this is recorded the way it is, the whole account. And I'm not talking about going all the way back to the very beginning of our study in Genesis with creation. I'm talking about going all the way back to Abraham. The whole account begins with what? You've got one man who grew up in pagan or in worship of a plurality of gods, right? You have that man and his wife who are old and they have no descendants. And then God makes a promise and says, I'm going to provide you with descendants. And He said multiple times that they were going to be like what? Stars of heaven. You won't be able to count it. The dust of the earth, the sands of the sea, you won't be able to count the descendants. Well, in Abraham, 2 Isaac, 3 Jacob, 4 his sons, they have gone from 0 to an old age to what? 70, right? So the question is, can God keep His promises? Sure can. Now, as the descendants of that generation are at the base of that mountain, we don't know how many people there are gathered in that moment, but the estimates that I've seen from different scholars say that there could have been over 1 million people at the base of that mountain. We don't know. And I've wondered, why didn't God tell us? Why didn't God tell us how many there were? Maybe because it wasn't important. Because usually if it is important, right, God tells us. But maybe He didn't tell us because He told Abraham and Isaac, they weren't going to be what? Counted, numbered, you know. So if you can't count it, how are you going to list a number? That's just my thought anyway. So he's showing them, though, that you know, just how this is going to magnify, how it's going to grow. And look at it today. Look at it today. How would you count it? How would you count the number of Christians today? You can't, really. I mean, not just in our life, but in the lives of our fathers and grandfathers and so forth. And again, am I talking physical here? No, I'm talking spiritual now, right? because that's what the point was. You read Galatians chapter 3, the point is a spiritual seed. It's very important to know. So all these sons, though, are the line that they're all passing through. And let's keep going now. Verse 28. He had sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to show the way before him in Goshen, and they came into the land of Goshen. That's verse 28, if I've lost you somewhere. Now, Goshen was the place they were told they were going to go to. Who knows Goshen? So far, the only person who knows Goshen of that family is whom? Joseph. And that's not a really populated area. It's not, at this moment anyway, it's not a populated area of Egypt. And yet it was an incredibly rich land. It's later going, yes, it's going to become the place of slaves. Right now, though, it's just not populated. But I find it interesting. Think about this with me for just one moment, class, and I promise I'll move on. Out of all the sons that Jacob could send on ahead, he sent who? Judah. I find it interesting that of all the sons, he sends Judah to point out the way. I think, class, that we're being told here, you would think he would send what? Who would you normally send in this kind of situation? The oldest, right? Who is the oldest? Reminder. Reuben. Or if not Reuben, because he's out of favor with Pop, right? We know that. You would think, who's going to be the next person? Simeon, right? Yeah, let's send that one. But he doesn't. He sends whom? Judah. Judah's down the line a piece, right? Except for the fact, class, that we've seen in this text that Judah has become more of a person of integrity like Joseph than the other brothers we've seen, just not counting Benjamin, right? Benjamin's a baby. I don't think there's any way, given what we've learned already, he's going to send Benjamin ahead to point the way because, the circumstances. But he sends here Judah. So he sends Judah to find the way to go and where they're going to be headed, and that brings us to verse 29. Then Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to meet Israel his father in Goshen. He presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. I love the way that's written. Can you just imagine with me, class, that scene? 22, maybe upwards of 23 years now he's been gone. That Jacob thought that Joseph was dead. Quite a reunion, don't you think? And can Joseph take care of his father? Let's keep going. Verse 30. And Israel said to Joseph, now isn't this an interesting statement, class? Now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive. I was in my personal Bible study recently, was studying Luke chapter 2, specifically verses 29 and 30. If you want to look there with me real quick, I want to show you something that I thought was interesting. Luke chapter 2, verses 29 and 30. Sovereign Lord, as you have promised, you may now dismiss your servant in peace. And here's the statement. For my eyes have what? What does it say? You got Simeon in the temple. And when he saw baby Jesus, right, he said to God, basically, Lord, you are now letting your servant depart in peace according to your word, for my eyes have seen your salvation. That's basically, if you think about it, class, isn't that basically what Jacob just said? I'm okay now. My eyes have seen your salvation. You've been saved. You're alive. We'll get to it in a few months or weeks. Philippians chapter 4. Do you know what the text in Philippians chapter 4 means? When God tells us in verse 6, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And He tells us that He will grant to us, those of us who are following Him, what does He say He'll grant to us? The peace of God which surpasses all what? Understanding. Philippians 4:7. Do you know what that peace is? It's not a cessation of conflict, is it? It's not having no problems. It's the contentment of knowing that what God has for us is enough. Just like Jacob said, this is enough. I think it's a beautiful picture here. And that's why what she's saying is the more you're in God's Word, the more you recognize this peace because you trust in Him that He's always kept His promises from, like we've said, from Abraham forward, right? He's always kept His promises. We're going to talk about tonight in my sermon tonight. Sometimes you pray and it seems like heaven is silent. And sometimes we think because there's silence that God's not answering, that God's not acting, but He is. This peace, listen, we win no matter how we win. I just hope that you can see that. It's a struggle for me sometimes. Eventually, no matter what happens, we win. Whatever happens tomorrow, it could be really bad. You could be like Job. You could have it all and lose it all in one day, right? But whatever happens, we win. Let's keep going. 31. Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh and will say to him, my brothers and my father's household who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. And the men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. Okay? Listen, when Pharaoh calls you on the telephone and says, hey, what's your occupation? What are you going to say? Your servants have been keepers of livestock from the youth, even until now, both we and our fathers, right? In order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, right? For what? Every shepherd is a what? What does it say? Every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. Now, if you read various commentaries, and there are a multitude of them with this particular section, they come up with some of the most fanciful ideas about this discussion here. It's quite absurd, some of the things I read. they talk about the fact they believe Joseph is being deceptive to Pharaoh and lying to him. And based on what I've seen with Joseph's integrity, do you think that's highly likely here? No. I think it's a very low possibility. I don't see that here in this discussion, but some commentaries do. I was talking with a preacher friend of mine back home in Alabama this weekend. Can you imagine what life was like for him in that day compared to what life is like for us? I mean, I don't know if any of you this morning, how many of you ate breakfast this morning? I didn't. Because of the time change, I woke up later than I normally do, and so I just scrambled, and I got 2 boys that won't wake up for nothing, so it takes most of our time to get them awake, and my mama, my wife, their mama, helping me, screaming sometimes with them, and get up! But, I mean, just think about, like I said, how different their life is compared to us. Maybe if you did eat this morning, how many of you ate a bowl of cereal? One of you? How many of you made something in the microwave this morning? Let me see. One person. All right. How many of you how many of you got donuts? More than a few. How many of you made something on the stove? Well, what the rest of y'all eat? I've gone through all the options. Cheese crackers, okay. Some of y'all ate a lot of Pop-Tarts or something. You know what I had a lot growing up as a kid? My mom every morning would get up and make my dad sausage and biscuit every morning. I mean, but after a while I got tired of sausage and biscuit, so I would eat cream of wheat. You ever had cream of wheat? I like cream of wheat. It's pretty good. What's that? Coffee. Well, I drink coffee, but that's not breakfast. You're wondering, what is his point? Let me get to it here. The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup. No. Did any of that happen with these people? Did they go to Dunkin' Donuts? Did they throw something in the microwave? No. I even thought about when our children were babies, and my friend and I were talking about this. With our first child, we tried cloth diapers. And after the first child, we were like, nope, not doing this again. And so then we went the disposable route, right, diapers. Did they have disposable diapers back here in Joseph and Jacob's day? No Pampers, right? They certainly didn't have that. Boy, I'll never forget this. When we lived in Channelview, and Gay remembers this, one of the sweet families at Channelview so they had with Haley her, what do you call it? Baby shower. My wife had Haley the day of our baby shower. So my wife wasn't even able to be at the baby shower. So Gay and Rhonda and the ladies at Channelview had the baby shower with my mother-in-law, who filled in for my wife because she was in the hospital, right? But one of the things they gave us was a diaper genie. How many of you had a diaper genie? They didn't have diaper genies, right? The point is, life was different. Life was so different. And so occupation is not the same thing for those people. They were shepherds. But who took care of their cattle? They did. Who built their houses? They did. Who tended their fences? They did. Who cooked their meals and cleaned their clothes? They did. Occupation wasn't the same thing in that day. That's the point. They had to exist differently than we do. Yeah, they had wives and they had servants, but it's just a different life, a different way of life. And so there are many things. Listen, if there are many things, if they go to Pharaoh and he says, hey, what can you do? Well, I can build houses. Well, then put him over here to building houses then, right? Because there had been many places in Egypt they could have built houses, right? Are you following me? And if one part of the family says, well, I can build houses, another part says, well, I build fences, another person says, well, I do this and I do that, then what's going to happen to the family? They're going to be scattered. Was it God's will that they be scattered? No. And by the way, they didn't do so well when they were scattered in Canaan, if you remember. So what Joseph says is, let's focus on the fact that we have done what? Tended sheep and cattle, right? He's talking about livestock here. Mostly just sheep, yeah. Yeah, the Egyptians had cattle. Yeah, come down here. That's true. That's a good point. Yeah, you got to go there because sheep did what to the land? They ate it up. That's right. If you study history, there was a lot of, especially even in our country, when you had the sheep, people fought over that land because if the sheep got into your land, I mean, it would devastate your land. So there was people killed because of sheep in our country. But the whole point is, why? Why tell them this about, the sheep, about the livestock? The last statement is important. Why? Because the Egyptians what? They don't like it. They don't like it. And if the Egyptians don't like it, then guess what they're going to be able to do? They're going to be able to stay in Goshen all by themselves, without problems from the Egyptians about being scattered among the nation. We can stay together right here in the land of Goshen. So he knows how to provide for them. That's my point. He can't provide for them. Joseph can't provide for them in the same way if they're scattered over the four corners of Egypt, right? So the fact is, he knows how to provide for them because God is blessing him. And class, isn't this an amazing account? It is to me. There's no, you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, you'd be surprised probably how many people since we started this, well, you remember when I did the Joseph series last year? Y'all remember that? Both then and now, I've had people come to me and say, man, Joseph's my favorite account. And I think I understand why. I think I understand why people view this account of Joseph so fondly. Because you think about it, the way he could use Joseph, because of Joseph's integrity, despite what he went through, right? It just communicates to us in a very powerful way, I think. All right, any closing questions or comments here for this section here of chapter 46? Anything that you got that you want us to talk about before we move on next week? Yes, ma'am, Bobby. Yeah, plenty of slaves already, even at this point, just not Israelite slaves. That I'm certain that they had slaves. They had slaves that could be shepherds, yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes, and if they had been scattered, then the worship could have been limited. So I like that idea. The babies. Israelites, that's right. Yep. Anybody else? Yeah. Productive young man. The baby. Yep. He wasn't. No. As we said weeks ago, I think we have to re-examine the perspective we have of Benjamin sometimes. All right. Anybody else? All right, let's close with prayer. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Have a wonderful afternoon, and tonight I would invite you to come back and be with us. We're going to be, if you want to, if you want some spoilers, you can go home and read Luke 18 if you hadn't got anything else to do today. You go home and read Luke 18. Let's close with prayer. Father in heaven, we are so grateful to you for this amazing account of Joseph and the reunion with his father and with his brothers. As I said, Father, I'm amazed as I read in your word Jacob's reaction after being reunited with his son, the salvation of Joseph, our salvation, and what we spoke about with Simeon and the temple and seeing your son born on this earth. I hope, Father, that we can trust in your promises the way that we ought to. I know that we have to be reminded, Father, and we're grateful that your word does it in such a magnificent fashion. But, Father, help us to always be aware that you are a God who keeps his promises. And yet, Father, that's not only a good thing, but that can be a terrifying thing for someone who is outside of your covenant. If they don't know your son Jesus, if they don't have a relationship with your son, then it's a terrifying thing to know that you are a God who keeps his promises. You've told us in your word in Thessalonians that there is going to be fire and judgment upon those that know not you or do not obey the gospel. And Father, that concerns me for people who don't know you and don't have a relationship with you through your son Jesus. Maybe they believe in something else. They think that something else is going to save them in the end. But Father, you have kept your promises all along throughout your word. We see it and we know that you will keep your promise to us, salvation, being assured of being before a loving and just Heavenly Father who will say to us, well done, but the same God who will also say, depart from me, you who work lawlessness. And Father, help us to share the message of salvation with those people before it's too late. Help us to love them enough to do that. And as we talked about in the sermon this morning, the light that we shine, may we be consistent with what we say and what we do. Because, Father, one of the greatest hindrances to sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ sometimes is that the way we live doesn't seem to be in harmony with who we claim to be. And that is an awful feeling, guilt that I think sometimes I feel, and I know others may feel that as well, when we see our failures and we're not living up to the standard, to the measure of the fullness of Jesus Christ, and we're not always doing and saying things that we know your Son would do. We're thankful for your grace and your mercy in those moments that we learn and we grow, and that we would become better witnesses of what Jesus has done for us. So, Father, be with us now as we leave this place. Guard us safely to our homes. Be with us throughout the rest of this day and as we begin our week. Father, we thank you for Jesus, and it's through his name that we pray. Amen. Thank you, church family.